Yesterday I talked about Firefox driver, I talked about Internet Explorer driver, Chrome driver, how to work with them. Fine. I created the instances of each of the drivers, right? I hope you got the recorded sessions from yesterday as well. If you haven't got it, let me know, I'll give it to you. Okay. Now let's move further from the place where we had left ourselves yesterday in the first Selenium program in which I was creating objects. Okay, I'll create a new class or new project over here called day 3, and in that project you add the jar files of Selenium file. Now you can create a new class, and I'll name that class as say, or hold on, let me not create the new class right now. Look, the thing is, yesterday I created objects of Firefox driver, I created object of Chrome driver, I created object of Internet Explorer driver. Each of these classes, as the logic goes, will have its own set of functions, right? But what if I have to uh, do some operation in Firefox? I have to click on a link or something, or on Chrome or on IE. Will the procedure be different? Getting my point, right? For Firefox I have a different class, for Chrome I have a different class, for IE I have a different class, right? Safari browser is also partially supported by Selenium. Safari driver is also there. Then there are other drivers like Android driver is there. Then there is something known as HTML unit driver. So there are various drivers. If I have to click on a link in Android, in Firefox, in Chrome or IE, will I have to learn individual drivers separately and the features of those individual drivers? You got my point, right? The clear answer is no, you don't have to do that, right? The concept of interfaces in Selenium, sorry, concept of interfaces in Java, right? It helps you a lot. Fine. I am going to create a new interface in the new project. Okay, interface is different than a class in Java language. Okay, interface can be named something like, for example, a very simple thing, book. Okay, I have an interface known as book. In the interface, what do you mean by interface? First of all, interface is just like an outline of what your application is supposed to do. For example, if you open a normal textbook, don't confuse that textbook with this interface book. I'm just talking about it. You see on the first page all the list of topics and all are listed. That is what all is covered in the book, right? So those topics, they provide you an overview of what the book is about, what all topics will be covered. Or for example, you visit my website qtpselenium.com. Fine. You visit my site qtpselenium.com, and suppose you go to anything, like if you go to Selenium training course, you get a page like this. Now this page is like an interface. It tells you what all is there inside each and every module, right? So this interface will not actually tell you how it is implemented, okay, but it's giving you an overview. Similarly, a book interface can be something like this. It can have features of a book like public, void price, or get price, a function like this, public, void I'm sorry, get author. Fine. I have not. These are the two functions or methods in the interface, right? In these functions or methods, you do not have the body. You only have the names. That's it. You don't know how get price is implemented. You don't know how get author is implemented. But if a third person looks at this interface, he can simply say what are the features of this book. This book can, you can get the price of the book, you can get the author of the book. Okay. Now suppose I create a new class known as comic book. I'm creating a class here. Right. Now what is the relation between comic book and book? The relation is that comic book is a book. There is a relationship. Okay. Whenever there is a relationship in Java, inheritance comes into the play. Right. What I mean to say is that you will write like this: comic book implements book. Right. When we write the comic book is implementing the book interface, that means that comic book has decided to implement all the functions in this interface. If I move my mouse over this error, right, you can select the fix, that is add unimplemented methods. Okay, so these two methods, get price and get author, will come into picture. The question being asked is, what is the difference between a class and an interface? In the interface, you do not have the bodies of the functions. You have functions, but you just don't declare the bodies. You don't implement them. The functions are implemented by the class which is implementing the interface. Okay, and that's what it is doing. Comic book is implementing the book interface, so it has to go forward and implement both the functions in the interface. All right. Now, if you talk technically, okay, what is this override? This is known as annotation. It's not compulsory over here. I can also remove it, but keeping it tells a third person, if he looks at this class, that this method is coming from the book interface. If you look at this is just like a marker, you can say. Okay, this tells us that this function is actually coming from the book interface. So if a class is implementing an interface, it is mandatory for it to implement all the functions of the interface. If I delete one of the functions, I will get an error immediately. Okay, so it is mandatory for me that I implement all the functions of this interface in case I want to properly implement this interface. Okay, now second thing, I'm sorry, I have a very bad throat today, sorry. If I have a variable public, say int pages, right, uh, by default this variable, or say max pages, allowed, right. So by default the variables in an interface are first of all final. What do you mean by final? Final means that you cannot change their values. You have to declare their initial values, and later on you cannot change their values. Okay, and they are static by nature by default. Even if I am not writing static over here, automatically the variables in an interface are automatically static and final. That means you cannot change them, and if you have to access them, you have to access them like this, something like this: page dot sorry book dot max pages allowed, something like this, because static variable is accessed with the class or the interface name dot the static thing. The functions, they are always non-static. You cannot have static functions in interface. But these details are there. They are the technical details in Java. But for Selenium, you actually don't need them. For Selenium, just remember that in the interface you will have functions, and in the class, in one of in the class which is implementing the interface, it is you will have the implementation of the functions. Okay, in get price function over here, I can write um, comic book price is say 400. Okay, and then comic book author is some XYZ name, anything, right? So sorry, okay, hold on. I'm sorry. Now I'll create a new class and I will name that class as say storybook. Now storybook is also a book, right? So it will implement the book interface. Okay, once it's implementing the book interface, it becomes mandatory for it to implement all the functions in the book interface, right? So you write over here in get price, that is price of storybook is something like this, and author of storybook just excuse me guys, I'm a little slow today, I'm having cold. Fine, so this is this is storybook, right? And these are the two functions over which are coming from the book interface. Fine, so the overall concept is that if you look at it technically, then this is my book interface and two classes, storybook and comic book, are implementing the book interface. What advantage do I have from this kind of a structure? What is the necessity of this interface? I could have simply deleted this and I would have created two separate files, storybook and comic book. Why is the need of the interface out here? The reason is that interface gives a structure to your application. You know that get price and get author functions will always be there in the classes which are implementing this interface. Comic book can implement get price function in its own way, and storybook can implement the get price function in its own way. But both the Java files, okay, both these Java files will have get price and get author functions. Suppose tomorrow a new book comes up, say Java book, and it also implements the book interface. It will also have both the functions. So all the books which will be coming inside my project will have both these functions if they are implementing the book interface. So this gives a structure to my complete application. Is this thing clear? Any doubts? Are we only have functions in the interface or can have additional to the one in? I cannot understand you. What do you mean by additional to the one in the interface?
Like if we have like only price and the author, can we have any additional function which can be in the comic book?
If I add one more function today out here in the book interface, and I call that function, say, for example,
I'm talking about the comic book. If the comic book can have only the price and author, or it can have any additional functions to the price and author.
Yeah, it can have additional functions.
Okay.
I can have more functions here, but these two are mandatory.
Okay. Thank you.
Right. The question being asked by Mohan is that what is the need of interface? Well, Mohan, the interface will actually, you can say, give a structure to your application. That's what I told you, right? If in case I have a new book coming up, I will know that that particular book will be implementing both these functions. Okay, right. If I never had this interface, then I could have any function in comic book, right? It's not necessary for the comic book to have get price and get author if I don't have the interface, right? It can implement its own set of functions, right? Storybook can implement its own set of functions. So I will not know what is happening in the whole code. But if I have an interface, I can design a structure for the whole code. Can these functions be? Yes, they can be used. They can be used, but don't go to that level. That is not required in Selenium as of now. Okay. Okay. Is there any limit in giving an override in an interface? No, there's no limit as such. There's no limit. You can have anything. Okay, right? Yeah, this is a kind of inheritance itself. Right? This is inheritance, a class acquiring properties of another class. Like this is the book interface, and comic book is acquiring functions from the book interface. Okay, now coming over to the practical aspect of it, how this thing is used in WebDriver. Okay, now everybody has heard about the word WebDriver. If you go to seleniumhq.org and if you look at the Java documentation, then in the Java documentation, whatever is there in italics, okay, this is an interface, right? Whatever is there in italics, for example, say mouse. Mouse is an interface. It represents the basic mouse operations like click, context click, double click, mouse to mouse move up and all, right? And these are the classes which are implementing the mouse interface: event firing mouse and HTML unit mouse. Okay, everybody has heard about word WebDriver. What is a WebDriver? What is WebDriver? In the API, WebDriver is basically an interface. Technically, WebDriver is an interface. It's got all these functions. Okay, and the implementing classes are these classes: Android driver, Android WebDriver, Chrome driver, Firefox driver, Internet Explorer driver, HTML unit, iPhone, remote driver, Safari driver. So all the drivers which are available in Selenium API, right? We talked about three drivers yesterday, right? That is Firefox, Chrome, and IE, right? All these drivers, they are implementing a single interface known as WebDriver interface. That means that whatever functions are there in the WebDriver interface, they will be present in all these driver classes. You got my point, right? This is the starting point of the architecture of Selenium. So if anybody asks you what is the architecture of Selenium, the architecture starts with the WebDriver interface. Okay, WebDriver is an interface, and all the other driver classes, they are implementing the interface WebDriver. Okay, that means that the functions which are there in WebDriver will be there in all the classes. And no, Pratiksha, there is no other way to declare it. This is the only. Okay, that means that the functions which are there in the WebDriver interface will be present in all these drivers. So if I look at yesterday's code, right, the functions which are there with iDriver, most of the functions will also be there with Chrome and Firefox. So basically all the basic operations like finding something on the page, finding a link button or an edit box on the page and using it or clicking it, the way we do it in Firefox driver, the same way we will do in Chrome driver and the same way we will do in iDriver, because all of them, they implement the same interface, right? And even if a new driver comes up tomorrow, say XYZ driver for a new browser, fine, that driver will also have the same set of functions. So you will not have to really worry that what, for example, Safari driver came up around 6 months back. So I never had to do anything, right? It has the same set of features which all the other drivers have. Fine, the function names are same. Maybe the implementation inside it is different, right? I hope you got my point, right? What I'm trying to say. If you're not able to understand the concept, then let me know. Fine. Now, I'll make a new class over here known as a client. In this class, I'll create the object of comic book. Okay, right? Then I will create the object of storybook. Okay, with the help of comic book, I can call the functions get author and get price from comic book, and with the storybook, I can call get author and get price. Okay, now suppose storybook has one of its own functions. It says that fine, I implement these two from the book interface because these are mandatory, but I have another function, say public void or anything like fairy tales, something like this. Okay, so this function is not coming from the book interface. This is storybook internal function. Okay, so if I go to my client.java, I can call it from here. I can write s.fairytales as well. This will not be available in comic book, obviously, right? So this is a function which is not a part of book interface. So the class which is implementing the interface can implement its own set of functions, right? So what happens out here in case of Selenium? Do these classes they implement their own set of functions? No, there are functions which are specific for Firefox driver which are implemented by only Firefox, but there are hardly such functions and they are hardly used. The functions which are primarily used come from the WebDriver interface. Okay, so you really don't have to worry that what if these classes Firefox driver, iDriver and all, they get their own set of functions, right? Now another, the most important thing is this thing. Look, you don't worry, you just listen to this carefully. Okay, till now how am I creating the object? I'm creating the object like this. Name of the class reference equals to new name of the class. Now I'll create the object like this. Book B1 equals to say new storybook. Now this is different than this. Out here what I have done interface reference equals to new class which is implementing the interface. This is what I have done. This is the interface reference equals to new class storybook which is implementing this interface. This thing out here is quite simple. Class name equals to new class name. What is the difference between this and this? If I am writing like this, then please note with the help of B1 I can only access the functions which are in the interface and implemented in the class. I cannot access the local functions of the class like fairy tales. If I write b1 dot, I'll get the function get author. If I write b1 dot, I'll get the function get price. But I cannot write b1 dot fairy tales. If I'm creating the object like this, you cannot access the function which is local to the class. But this thing is very important. Okay, this thing is very important. Why? Okay, hold on, I'll tell you. You know that WebDriver is an interface, right? And Firefox driver is the class which is implementing the interface, right? How do you create the object of Firefox driver? Yesterday I told you, right? Firefox driver equals to new Firefox driver. This is what you do. This is similar to storybook s equals to new storybook. But I can also write like this. WebDriver d equals to new Firefox driver. That means the interface reference equals to new class which is implementing the interface. Something like this. We prefer it doing the second way. Why do we prefer doing the second way? First of all, are you guys confused? If anybody is confused, please let me know, right? Because this thing is important. Okay, so what is the confusion, Vinod? What is the question? Set of functions with multiple interfaces. I cannot get you. What do you mean by set of functions with multiple interfaces? Okay, please explain this. All right. Okay, I'll repeat once. Fine. Look, the thing is, there are two things. Let's talk about the local. Don't look at this Firefox driver or WebDriver. Look at this thing. Look at this thing, right? I am creating the object of the class here by giving the class name reference equals to new class. Out here, I am writing the interface name reference equals to new class. This is clear. This is the interface name. This is the class name. This is the difference. But what do I? No, it's not necessary, Vijaya, to use all the functions. You can use the selected ones which you want. Okay. So hold on. I'll come over to it. Okay. This line over here is same as this. You can access all the functions of Storybook while using this, or you can access all the functions of Firefox Drive when you use this. Right. Now, when you write like this over here, book B1 equals to new storybook, right? And this B1, with the help of B1, you can access only those functions which are there in the interface coming over in the book. Is this thing clear? You cannot access fairy tales function which is local to the book class, storybook class, right? This thing is clear, right? Okay. Now, when I talk about Selenium, in Selenium Firefox driver class is there, I can initialize this class like this, or I can write the interface name driver equals to new Firefox driver. The output for both the lines will be same. There will be no difference. Two Firefox windows will open. One, this line will open, the other window, this line will open. But the difference, what is the difference? What is the advantage of using the second line? I'll talk about that. Okay, if I run this code, you will see that two Firefox browsers will open. First line will open one of the browsers, second line will open the other browser. You see, this first browser has opened, and after that, the second browser has also opened. So I've got two browsers out here which are opened up. One is this, one is this. Fine. Okay, but why do we write like this? This is the question. Okay, we write like this because at times we have to test on multiple browsers. If I'm writing WebDriver D equals to new Firefox driver, fine. In the next line, I can also write D equals to new Chrome driver, because D in the end is the reference of the WebDriver interface. I cannot write dr equals to new Chrome driver. This will throw an error. Because dr is for, I cannot write Firefox driver equals to new Chrome driver, right? But WebDriver interface equals to new class which is implementing the interface. Are you getting my point? Why the second method is preferred? Okay, right? Now I'll create a new class called as multiple browsers. Okay, now at times you have a script like this. You have a browser on which you want to test your application. Say it's Mozilla. I'm hard coding the browser name over here. right? But okay, I'm hard coding the browser name over here, but at times you will be reading the browser name from an external file like Excel file or a text file, anything, right? In some external data source, you keep your browser or in which you have to test your application, and from that you read that on which browser I have to test. So right now I'm just initializing this variable that I have to test my application on Mozilla browser. So I will declare WebDriver interface, that is WebDriver driver equals to null in the beginning. That means this reference is not pointing towards any browser. So depending on the browser name, I can initialize driver. I can write driver equals to new Firefox driver or Chrome driver or iDriver. Depending on the browser name, I just have to use if-else statements. I can use if browser is equal to Mozilla, then driver is equal to new Firefox driver, right? Else, if the browser is equal to Chrome, then you have to set the system property and all for the Chrome, which I did yesterday. This was the line, right? System.set property webdriver.chrome.driver and driver equals to new Chrome driver. Okay, and for I as well, if the browser is equal to I, then we have to set the system property for iDriver and driver equals to new Internet Explorer driver. So tomorrow, if you are reading from an Excel file and this changes to I will open. If in Excel file you change it to Chrome, we'll see how to do that. But right now I'm hard coding this. If I change it to Chrome and if I run this, then Chrome will open. Fine, you see that. And once the browser is open, the commands are same because everything, all the driver classes are implementing the WebDriver interface. All the driver classes have the same set of commands. So you can simply write driver dot get any URL, say http bbc.com. So whether it is Mozilla, whether it is Chrome, whether it is get function will be there in all the all the drivers because ultimately the drivers are implementing the WebDriver interface. So whatever browser opens, it will navigate simply to bbc.com. See that? Mozilla goes to BBC, right? If you make it Mozilla and run this, see Mozilla opens and it goes to bbc.com. So you really don't have to change your code. Later on we'll make a code like this, that is we'll read the browser from an external file and we will simply keep the code same. We will not change the code. So is there any doubt regarding this? That is what the interface is, how the drivers they implement the interface, okay, and what is the advantage of interfaces? They give a structure to the whole application. Fine, right? Any questions? Any questions from anybody? No questions? Either you have understood it or you have not at all understood it. Right? Okay. Got it. Okay. There are questions being asked. Why we declare as null? Null means nothing. Initially, it is not pointing towards anything. Okay. Initially, I am assuming that it is not pointing towards anything. Null means nothing. Okay. For example, if I write over here string s equals to null, that means string has not been initialized. Okay. Yeah, Lakshmi. Is it compulsory? Yeah. No, it's not. Yeah, it is compulsory. You should not keep it uninitialized like this. Right? You will get an error over here. If you move your mouse over the error, you'll say that local variable driver may not have been initialized. So you just keep it initialized as a formality sake to null. Okay. Yeah, that's what I told you, right? If you don't declare it null, Java can think that you never initialize this object and you're trying to use it. Okay. So you just initialize it to null. Null means nothing. If you have studied QTP as well, we destroy the objects by pointing towards nothing, right? Okay, in QTP as well. So it's similar to that. Okay. So any other questions? All right. Now, once you have gone to the website, your web application, after that, what you have to do is that you have to interact with the pages, right? Now, I'll tell you how to do that. I'll tell you how to do that tomorrow. Uh, I'm having cold as well. Plus, I don't want. I want time, right? If I want to take up the concept of how to interact with the objects on the pages, what are the various types of identification mechanisms and all those things, right? So I need time for that, which I don't have right now. Fine. So just have a look at these things which I have taught. You'll get the recorded video for today's class. Okay, and that's it from my side.